Okay, we'll give this a shot. I almost feel as, we should get a seventh inning stretch already. Folks are already, hearing a couple of different things, want you to warm up a little bit. I take a somewhat different approach toward these kinds of questions. So rather than teaching information technology per se, what I try to do instead is to teach folks how to think in the context of technology, not about technology. The problem is that too many of the students take a rote learning approach. You just teach me the answer or teach me the data or the facts. The problem that presents is that if it's so algorithmic, then an algorithm will do it and those jobs won't exist. So I really try to take this a level below that. One of the scholars I really like to point to for that is Clay Christensen, who had this really wonderful observation that if he can teach you the right framework for thinking about a problem, then when you see it in new contexts, you'll be able to get the right answer for yourself as opposed to having been told that answer. And I think that was really a deep and important insight. One of the things I liked about the first presentation was this idea of look forward and reason back. And that is a useful thing to do. That's a better way to think about the problem. So that's what I'm going to try to do. And I'm going to do this in an interesting context here. So I want to give you 5 questions. And we'll see if we can actually teach that methodology across these 5 questions. Okay, so the first question is, why do platforms have such high market caps but so few assets or employees? The second one is, why does traditional product strategy fail in a platform marketplace? So the traditional mechanisms just don't work there. Why is that the case? The third one, suppose you take regulators who have to approach platform questions. Why does traditional antitrust fail in a platform marketplace? A fourth one, why is misinformation such a hard problem? This happens to be my latest research as opposed to just the teaching, but it's also a problem I've been working on. And one that students ask a lot, and I hear a lot in the industry now, is what about these decentralized autonomous organizations or blockchain technology? Aren't they going to displace platforms? So is that the case? Are DAOs going to dethrone Uber and Apple and Airbnb and Facebook and others in here? I want to try to convince you all of these questions have the same answer. If you know the underlying theories. Do any of you think these answers are obvious? Anyone? I want to convince you, if you understand the dynamics of what's happening underneath, all of them have different versions of the same answer. So that's what I really want to try to do, and that's what a lot of what the course tries to do. So the first of these is simply, all right, we'll start with the basic concept of network effects. That is the place to start, absolutely. And most of the students think they know, because they have social networks, that they understand what network effects are. So I like to use this visual as a starting point for that. So everyone gets the idea of a social network where if one party connects to another, then you get some other connectivity benefits. But what they often don't understand about network effects is externalities. Externalities are the gold links that don't happen because of one person's activity. It's because somebody's orchestrating that activity. It's Google making your search better based on mine, or Netflix making your movie watching experience better based on Avi's, or something of that sort. They're taking those interactions and they're using them to make other adjacent interactions better. That doesn't happen by accident. So in this example here, all the blue things happen by self-motivated activity. But the gold is somebody orchestrating positive externalities to cause additional value to be created. And then the question is, who gets to capture that value? And typically it's the orchestrator that gets to capture that value, which is then again why these platforms are so valuable. So if we go to this question of why are platforms so valuable compared to others, if you compare BMW versus Uber, Marriott versus Airbnb, Walt Disney versus Facebook, what's fascinating is that if you look at the market value per employee, it's about 5 to 25 times. It's just order of magnitude different. It's incredibly different. If you look at some of the other data on it, this was from Kuzmato and Annabelle Gower's book. If you looked at different traditional versus platform firms, they have higher market cap, 21 billion versus 8, higher margins, but only half the employees. So how are they doing that? What's happening in that context? Well, if you understand the concept of network effects properly, then it makes a lot more sense. So if you take a look at how would you scale network effects, this might be scaling the network effects inside the firm. Those are the resources you have. Avi mentioned earlier, or it was Paul mentioned earlier. Joy's comment, most of the smartest people work for somebody else. Well, the same thing's true here. How are you going to scale network effects inside the firm relative to outside the firm? It is vastly easier to scale network effects outside the firm than inside the firm because there are more people and resources outside the firm. So what does this do? It inverts the firm. So I'm going backwards here, and that's not what I want. No. So it inverts the firm. So what's happening is so much of the value is being produced off the books in this context. So you and I produce the Facebook posts. You and I produce the TikTok videos in there. Yes, even the old guys produce those too, thank you. Right? So Airbnb hosts produce that value. Uber guests produce that value. What are the web pages Google delivers? They're not done by Google, they're only delivered by Google. You and I in businesses create those. All that value is created outside the firm. So platforms are inverted firms, if you will. The value is being done off the books by third parties, and it's orchestration of those network effects that's actually making a lot of the value in there. So what else does this mean? You can predict when markets transform using a framework like this. At its core, each of these is simply asking a better question. What's the question? How easily can you create an inverted firm, that is, where third parties are creating that value? So we're looking at prediction taxonomy. This is a simple way to do it. Every single one of these questions is simply a mechanism for asking, how easily can you create an inverted firm with network effects? First one's really simple. What proportion of the value is created by information? Why? Because you can spread that across more people. It's really easy for one person to create lots of value for other people with information goods. Hence, we have software and video and tweets transformed really easily. Indranil just talked to us about another one that's good, interesting in here. Is it safe for third-party experimentation? If it's not, then you want to internalize it. That's one of the reasons why healthcare will transform, because it is a high information business, but it's not necessarily safe for experimentation. If you open APIs on pacemakers, you'll kill people. That's dangerous. If you open APIs on nuclear power plants, terrorists will blow them up. So you internalize that risk, vertically integrate in there. That's not an inverted firm strategy in there. Another one, modular. If it's modular, precise, fine-grained input, it's really easy for third parties to produce it. A ride, a tweet, a stay, an app. But take a Boeing airplane. Boeing can't even get it right? The 737 MAX is grounded for years because it's so complex. You have to actually orchestrate that complexity yourself. You wouldn't crowdsource an aircraft in there. So there are all different ways of thinking about it. But also in the case of healthcare, it's interesting. Healthcare is absolutely transforming to a platform, but you can see why it will transform later, because it's risky and you have to deal with those risks. Now, this is another thing. It was one of the questions I asked Andy over there earlier. You can use this not just as a predictive framework, but if you're really doing strategy, you can cause it to happen. So the things you can do to force your industry to transform are add information to your products, modularize the products, absorb risk, borrow spare capacity. All these are different elements of trying to create those same kinds of things. So it's a predictive framework as well as a control framework for how do you invert the firm in order to create network effects and create value and orchestrate that value is a way of thinking about it. Second question, why is it that traditional product strategy fails in platform markets? So I like to use this as a fun example here. So let's take this as a simple case. If you have this HP calculator, how easily can you add this community to that calculator? But I want you to now flip that question. So again, this is the art of asking questions. If you have this community, how easily can you add this HP calculator? And the way we'll do this is I'll just want to take you to a really simple case. On here is my own perfect finance HP calculator. Anyone guess how much I paid for it? It was actually $1. But that's because I didn't want the ads, okay? Now, did Google produce it? No. Did HP produce it? No, but guess what? It is absolutely wiping out HP sales because I can get the ad-free version for free, or I can get the ad-free version for $1. Now, so I ask the question, how easy is it for HP to add this versus how easy is it for Google to add that? It's trivial They did it without even trying, okay? So the point is really simple once you see it. It's far easier to add a technology to a community than it is to add a community to a technology. That's the critical resource. You have to manage the network effects. You have to manage the community in there. The other implications of that, again, for strategy are traditional strategy doesn't work in those marketplaces. So what do we teach? Porter's 5 forces. You have separate forces for buyers, suppliers. You build up barriers to entry and boulevards to exit. You control the inimitable resources. One of the things we heard this morning is you actually have to open round key control points. You're not controlling everything. We flip those things. So you've got overlapping consumers and producers. Competitors can actually be your complementers at times, right? Kindle is allowed on Apple systems. Google Maps is allowed in Apple systems. Skype is allowed on other systems. Your complementers your competitors can even be complementers under very precise terms where you own the relationship and you own the data. Another one is your scale economies switch from supply side to demand side, or network effects, of course, the other synonym on that one. And what's really interesting here is you shift from barriers to entry to permissionless entry. Here you're keeping competitors out. You want as many producers and consumers as possible. Amazon wants as many merchants as possible. Google wants as many developers as possible. Uber wants all the drivers. Amazon wants Airbnb wants all the hosts. Again, it's permissionless entry of production and consumption, not barriers to entry for competition. Different way of thinking about the problem because your community is your asset, okay? Why does traditional antitrust fail in these markets? Look at all the tests that we use in regulation to understand what antitrust does. So first problem is, what's the market definition? Well, is your market share high in books, cloud publishing, or groceries for Alibaba? I mean, for Amazon? What about Alibaba? Are they in e-commerce, health, cloud, payments, bank, movies, logistics? Used to be one company, now it's 6, but that's not their question. China's now breaking them up. What about Google? Are they in email, search, maps, self-driving cars, devices? What the hell is the market boundary? How are you going to build a barrier to entry at a boundary you can't define? Another question. Well, we learned from classic economics, how do you measure monopoly in it? Well, you go look at the restricted output. So if you go from competition, where you got marginal cost pricing, then you can restrict output to get duopoly or monopoly pricing. But is Google restricting your searches? Is Facebook restricting your posts? Is Amazon restricting your consumption? Hell no, absolutely not. That test fails. All right, let's try another test. What about the small but significant increase in price test for antitrust? That means effectively that either two versions of this, you're pricing above marginal cost. Why? You got pricing power. Or what about pricing below marginal cost? Then you're trying to kill the competition in order to, you've driven the business out, then it'll all be yours. Both of those tests fail. All of you know now, two-sided pricing, well, profit maximizing price can be zero absent competition. So what the hell's going on? Antitrust fails under the traditional models. So what's going on? Once you understand it as an inverted firm, all of a sudden this makes sense, okay? If you're doing the boundary definition problem, well, it's a lot clearer when you see that third parties are producing the apps, the books, or the merchant sales. Third parties are doing it, and they'll bring you additional stuff. Another one in here is you don't care about the cost of production when you have zero marginal costs of production. You want as many of those business activities as possible because you'll just take your share of the royalty. Zero marginal cost production means you simply scale that everyone you possibly can because you're going to take your share in that. Or if you take the two-sided network effect model, well, then it becomes obvious that you're subsidizing a portion of the market in order to capture a different side. Again, value creation versus value capture in there, but you have to understand externalities and network effects in order to do that, okay? Here's another one that's just kind of framework. So we learned from Harvard, you can't teach without a 2x2. So here's a 2x2. One thing I like about this one, this is totally MISI, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, and it tells you the right way to do a governance framework. So it's really simple. So you look at the transactions happening on platform, and the one actually, are they good transactions or are they bad transactions? And so your governance model, in order to orchestrate interactions and network effects. Make sure the good interactions are occurring and the bad ones are not occurring. If the bad ones are occurring, you've got fraud or externalities, and if the good ones are not, then you've got a missing marketplace. And so your design framework is actually to do orchestration to cause this to happen. Why? That's the source of your wealth creation, and you create value from one party to another. When I showed you those blue and gold bars on the first slide, that's what you're managing to create wealth and cause it to happen. So it's really simple. Another framework. By the way, all these frameworks are in the new version of the book, so if you want it, that'll be coming out shortly. The slides are also available on that. Here's one that's my latest research. I found this really interesting because I think this is one of the biggest social problems we face today. It's not just what we're teaching, it's whether our societies are falling apart. If we can't agree on whether or not the planet's warming or who's president or whether vaccines work, that's a problem. And I think most people think of the misinformation problem as truth or falsity, and I say that's not the case. There's plenty of false information that doesn't matter. If it's just not believed, then it isn't going to influence anything. Or there's plenty of true information that does matter because it's a half-truth that causes you to make errors. So I would argue that the real problems are decision errors and negative externalities. The illustrations here are the loss of herd immunity because of vaccination campaigns, it's people shooting up pizza parlors, it's insurrections in the United States and Brazil. As the externalities, Facebook is not internalizing those externalities. That's why it's the problem. But to actually articulate why I think this is a deeper problem, again, the nature of the research, externalities cause market failures which require intervention. But government intervention in the case of speech is expressly forbidden by the First Amendment. It's not possible. What this means is that the attempts by courts to turn the problem over to the marketplace of ideas necessarily fail. Why? Markets do not self-correct market failures, and so we're stuck. And that's the real reason why this is such a hard problem. That, however, means that if we've got the tools and the comprehension, there may be ways of going after this. Again, this is a bit of a research area. So one of the things I want to give you a way of thinking about this. So how do we think about normal marketplaces? The first fundamental welfare theorem of economics says that buyers and sellers consuming and producing in their own self-interest achieve a Pareto outcome. It's better than central planning. This is an insight that goes all the way back to Adam Smith. He says, it's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, and the baker that we expect our dinner, but from the regard to their own self-interest. He generated that in the 1800s. Von Hayek reiterated this as why markets work better than centrally planned economies. It was proven mathematically by Pareto, Arrow, and De Brugge separately. Except if they're information asymmetries or externalities. And now we're back to economics. And that's when it breaks down. So what do we do in that case? This is what I've been working on. So I'm hoping it's not just the teaching, but this is the research. Please ask questions about it or press on it. I actually think that there's a possibility to fix this. So my intuition is the following, which is if we use the information asymmetry tools of Spence, Akerlof, and Stieglitz, we can design signaling and screening mechanisms to get at the truth. Who knows what they're talking about and who knows they're lying? Let's design signaling and screening to add that to the conversation. The second component is also missed. There are two solutions to externality problems. One is PAGU, which is central taxes or subsidies. That's a problem because government can't do that. Government can't find speech. COS is the other solution. That's where we get externality arguments in here. And in that case, you assign property rights to the lowest cost avoider, and we may be able to solve these solutions. So one of the things I've tried to articulate in the research paper, won't go into it this morning, is a way to do that. So that you trade on the externality or force the people that are causing harm to internalize the damage. So this is the intuition as to why I think this should work. If that happens, speakers and listeners disseminating and seeking information should approach a near Pareto optimum. I believe the result is a market can curb misinformation with no censorship whatsoever and no central authority. The point is to be able to use these insights as design tools, not simply as prediction tools. Can we control the outcome? Can we do a better version of the outcome if you really understand what's happening underneath? So that's really one of the ideas. If you aren't interested in this, I could try to show you the mechanisms to try to make this happen, but I think It's possible. That's what I'm hoping.
So, Marshall, is it a legal solution that you're proposing? When you say speakers and listeners in their own self-interest?
So, more specifically, it is it's the optimal assignment of property rights. So I believe I can actually give you two new rights, a new listener right and a new speaker right, which will actually solve the problem. If you want to ask during the Q&A, I want to make sure I've got time to cover the rest of it. But I want to add two new rights for you to cause the trading in rights. The problem at the moment is like trying to solve CO2 and global warming with no concept of cap and trade. Once we've got a concept of cap and trade and you can do the trading on it, then there's a way to solve it. So the mechanism is to try to show you how to do that. It takes a few minutes to explain, but that's the way. So I want to give you added rights that are going to, again, give you additional speakers' capabilities and additional listeners' capabilities, that the balance of those things should achieve the right outcome. Okay? You have another question? Okay? You can ask it. If it's this, you can ask it now.
I was asking, for example, something like society norm or let's say something like reputation can be a good basically a substitute for central authority.
I despair of that option. Completely despair of that option. The reason being, we were just hearing from Florin earlier. Why? Because the ability to create deep fakes now is so, I can make you a puppet using your voice, your image, so the ability to pretend to be something else. I think at a deeper level, we need to get credible signals and credible screens. And the technology is so powerful, we're making it so easy to bluff and fake that reputation. I can pretend to be the New York Times. I can pretend to be an editor of the New York Times. I can pretend to you, I can pretend to be Tucker Carlson, right? And that I think is going to make that even harder. So I despair of that as an option. Can decentralized autonomous organized dethrone platforms? If this is what most of the libertarians think is going to happen, and they're wrong. If it's the case that the only thing you're doing is taking out the central gatekeeper and reducing transactions cost, that's completely correct. That's COS 101. So that will happen. So blockchain technology will remove middlemen and will reduce transactions cost. But will it dethrone platforms? No, they won't. At least not in their current form. Why? Because you have to do that extra orchestration. If you take the platform center out, you lose the extra gold value creation of the orchestration of positive externalities. You as an individual have no incentive and no wealth from creating extra Google search benefits for a third party. Google does. You have to have a center to be able to do that. Now, it's possible that DAOs will evolve governance, in which case, yes, it's possible that they may do that, but it has to be focused on the creation of that extra spillover, that positive externality. In the absence of doing that, they will never, I promise you, never dethrone. That's my prediction going forward. They will not dethrone platforms unless they do this. And I'm quite confident of that prediction because I'm quite confident of the underlying economics. So the predictions only focus on COS 101 and not COS 201 because they miss the externalities component of it. But once you orchestrate externalities, then it's possible. So to return to our questions, all of these have the same answer. Why do platforms have such high market cap with so few assets? Well, network effects drive inverted firms that harness external producers and assets not counted on the balance sheets. That's what's happening. Why does strategy fail? Product strategy fail in platform markets? Network effects mean community is the key asset outside, right? You want community permissionless entry, not competitor barrier to entry. So you want the community outside to join you and want the community to produce. So that's permissionless entry, not barrier to entry. Why does regulation in antitrust market fail? Well, in regulation, typically what we do is we create competition by dividing up the assets, but this is the problem. The information assets are non-rival. Network effects increase in scale, not in breakup or splitting across competitors. So we need different kinds of interventions that break open the governance model, not divide up the asset. And so that's a better way to solve this problem. We can give you some other solutions to that, but the traditional mechanisms violate the scale on the demand side even as they might help in some of the other elements. And they need to understand more deeply what's going on. Why is misinformation such a hard problem? That's the negative externalities, not the positive externalities. Once you understand the negative externalities, how do we force the creators of negative externalities to internalize those negative externalities? Once we do that, that problem will go away. And that's a much different kind of approach to the problem than anything that's been taken so far. We can also change the economics such that it becomes more expensive to produce fake news than honest journalism, once we create credible signals and screens. And the last one, can decentralized autonomous organizations dethrone platforms? No, because network effects require governance of positive spillovers. Those are market failures. Until you solve the market failure problem, the DAOs will not displace platforms. If they do solve market failures, then they could, but that tells you the trajectory to make it happen. So those are the mechanisms behind doing that. So understanding this gives you design tools. Understanding the fundamentals underneath all of this gives you the power to explain, the power to predict, and the power to design and to control. And that gives you a far more better leverage point than just looking at the technology details at any given point in time. Again, the overall point is to teach them how to think. It's not to teach them syntax. It's not to teach them the algorithm. That's going to change. The point is to teach them how to think. And there's some really deep economics to help do that. Yeah.
My question is precisely about this overall proposition of teaching them how to think.
Yeah.
That is obviously very, I think it's a very noble goal. But how about translation between how to think and the algorithm design? Because on many occasions, the problem arises not because of lack of objective, because the well-intended strategic objectives are lost in translation when you get quantifiable metrics and steps and algorithms. So how do you think about that?
Well, this is a great example of, we'll go back to Clay Christensen. So one of the things he points out is that he won't be the expert in any specific domain. But what he does is he goes in and teaches the method by which the expert of that domain can get the right answer. So, when he was teaching to Andy Grove, it's not that Clay Christensen knew about chips. Andy knew about chips at Intel. And so the trick is to mix those two things. You can't divorce it. It's not to say that the domain expertise doesn't matter. Of course it does matter. But you really want to be able to understand the specific mechanism. I liked fixed costs, variable costs, externalities, these transactions costs. These are enduring principles that you can use as your own design tools within a given context. And then go develop your expertise. The other one observation, which I don't know if it's still going to be true, is it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. I don't think that's going away, but we can actually help give them some ideas that help get them farther down the path. Other questions?
For last question,
Chuba.
Can I ask you a question about the first question that you had there? What about the role of customer assets, things like retained customers, acquired customers, the lifetime value of the customers? Those are intangible assets that go beyond the producers, but for platforms, that's a big driver of the intangible future cash flow.
We have an entire paper on that. Is a great question. Okay, if you're interested, we have a paper on literally customer lifetime value 2. It's standing for it's more next generation, but also in a two-sided marketplace. I can give you an exact framework for how to deal with exactly that question and how should you invest. We have an answer to that. It was just accepted MISQ a couple weeks ago. So the way to think about this is a two-sided market through time. So it's not just a two-sided market at this instance, so merchants attracting consumers and consumers attracting merchants, or developers and users and what have you. So most models don't model the network effect between the two sides. They do look at CLV, which is the NPV effectively of accumulated value. What we've done is to take that and then add the externality across the market. So if you're interested, I'm very happy to give you the details, but it's really the way to think about it is to take the two-sidedness across the producer and consumer relationship and then track that through time. And that's the way to get at CLV2. And there's a very straightforward mathematical model to do that.
Big driver of
Absolutely. Absolutely, and then you should be able to do if you want, we have a set of frameworks, we have some teaching tools and a model to do exactly that.
Some work in marketing with Carthy and Peter, Lehman and Stewart.
I was just corresponding with them this week on the extension for CLV2. So we have a model of that and very happy to share it.
Thank you very much.